Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, June 4th, 2019. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in City Hall in Council Chambers. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson. Mr. Balfons.
Here.
Ms. Bondo.
Présente.
Ms. Figdor.
Here.
Ms. Davis.
Here.
Ms. Morioni.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow.
Here.
Mr. Inabanza. Mr. Norris. Here. Ms. Power-Rakowski.
Here.
Mr. Samuntu. Mr. Abdirahman. And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And just real quick, Mr. Inabanza did let me know that he was not going to be able to make it tonight. And also Mr. Abdirahman told me he wouldn't be able to make it tonight. For the report of the chair, I just want to remind, of course, the board members who probably don't need reminders, but the public, that the FY20 budget referendum is next Tuesday. Early voting has actually started, and that is available here at City Hall. And then the referendum on Tuesday for people to show up at their local voting places. And I know the City of Portland has always been strongly supportive of public education and our budgets, and I'm sure and I hope that on Tuesday they end up supporting this budget that we're also proud of putting up for their consideration. Tonight, for the report of the students, Ms. Anna Powers-Rakowski is going to give us a Casco Bay High School report. Excuse me, a PATH report, pardon me. Anna, take it.
Could do both.
Hi.
Pretty much.
Thank you. So at PATHs, we're really winding down, especially for the seniors. We the sending schools stopped sending it earlier than the underclassmen, so it's been very quiet. Yeah, on the 23rd, we had our student celebration where 189 students received their diplomas. We gave out around $20,000 worth of scholarships, which is crazy. If you weren't at the, well, we don't call it a graduation. If you weren't at the student celebration, it was really beautiful to watch. It was really cool. This year we've had over 700 visitors to come into the school next year. Today we actually had our cybersecurity info day, and if you guys aren't aware, the cybersecurity is the new program coming to PATHs next year. It's third-party testing season, so we're waiting to see how the students did. The music program had their annual showcase at the St. Lawrence. It was 2 nights, and they were both phenomenal. Both of them were sold out. And there we also sold CDs of the students' originals over the past few years. And I think it was the day after that the visual arts program had their show, which was crazy. So many talented students. What else is there? In the now 19 programs, including the cybersecurity, we have multiple waiting lists with students coming into the next year. And all of our program have had a wild amount of visitors. So as the year winds down, everything's going smoothly. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. For the report of the superintendent, Mr. Botana.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. I love this time of year because we're able to see how all the hard work of our students and staff comes together as students prepare to turn the page, and there's no greater symbol of that than graduation. Our graduations this year all happen on Thursday. At 2 p.m., Portland High School hosts its graduates and supporters at Merrill Auditorium. At 4:30 p.m., Deering High School students graduate at Cross Insurance Arena. And at 7:30 p.m., Casco Bay students will graduate at Merrill Auditorium. All in all, a pretty busy day as approximately 500 Portland Public School students move on to the next phase of their lives, prepared and empowered. As the board will recall, all of our graduations are happening the same night to ensure that our ceremonies do not conflict with the Eid holiday. I'm grateful to the graduates, their families, and staff, and the staff of our high schools for their understanding and patience as we managed around this calendar conflict. It has given us an opportunity as a district and as a community to reflect on, grapple with, and ultimately practice our commitment to diversity, inclusiveness, and equity. I also want to remind the board and the larger community they're scheduled to break ground on the first of the buildings for our future project on Friday, June 14th at Lyseth Elementary School. This exciting first coincides with the end of the school year for our students, but our staff will have an additional day on Monday, June 17th. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the Portland Public Schools community, students, parents, and staff for a great year. I hope that everyone has a safe and relaxing summer and urge all of our students to stay connected to learning either through formal opportunities in summer school, camps, and such, or by making a point of reading, and reading, with maybe a little writing thrown in on the side over the summer. And finally, I would like to remind everyone, which Chair Rodriguez already did, that the school budget referendum is scheduled for a week from today, Tuesday, June 11th, and I would urge all of our parents, staff, and community members to take this important opportunity to have their voices heard on our school budget. And that concludes my report.
Yes, Ms. Thompson?
We don't have reports this evening, but I just wanted to recognize, because we had retirement recognition, that amongst our peers, we do have Ms. Lori Davis, who worked for Portland Public Schools. I don't know for how many years, but she's not 10. She's not retiring from the Portland Public Schools, but she's retiring from the University of Southern Maine, and I just wanted to wish you good luck from all of us and recognize your service to the Portland Public Schools as well, both as an employee but also as a board member. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Excuse me. For the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of May 21st, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, second by Ms. Figdor. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? How smooth. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of May 21st, 2019, please indicate. It's and abstaining, you weren't present. So it's 7 in favor, students voting with the majority, and Ms. Davis abstained. Thank you all. There's no report of the committees today. We're going to, actually, we'll do the consent items first, and then we'll switch things up. Consent items, will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. As required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board memo accompanying this item, and as has been the practice, each donor will receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance, and the contributions for this meeting are for the East End Community School. They received a donation to their Glee Club from one of our retirees, Marilyn Melton of Scarborough, who, as you know, also runs the Glee Club. So thank you, Marilyn. And Deering High School received a donation to assist students in need to purchase caps and gowns from Michelle Roy of Portland. And we're very grateful to both of these contributors for their support of our work.
Thank you, Superintendent. We're gonna switch something up on the agenda just to recognize someone who has a drive later on tonight. We want to spare them a late evening drive. So we're gonna do our personal items first, and then we'll get on with the rest of our agenda. So consideration and action to approve the personal items listed. Election of administrators. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Ms. Thompson. Any questions on the motion? Do you want to speak?
Yes,
Superintendent.
I'd be happy to. Today we have two administrators being recommended for appointment. First, we have Jade Costello. Jade is with us tonight. Jade is being recommended as assistant principal at Portland High School. Ms. Costello comes to us from the Springfield High School in Springfield, Vermont, where she also served as a school counselor and summer school director for a total of 11 years, I believe, Jade? 7 years, sorry. I was getting your 4 years as administrator and your time before that mixed up. So we're very grateful to have Jade join us. Jade holds a master's in school counseling from Boston College and a bachelor's in psychology from Bowdoin College. And so, Jade, would you like to say anything?
I just wanted to thank the board and the superintendent for welcoming me tonight, and to thank Principal Jepson for being so welcoming today and during my transition process. I've been very excited and curious about the role here after tonight. I feel something I don't feel very often, which is intimidated. You have some tenured educators who clearly set a very high standard of professionalism and warmth in your district, and I'm really excited to call the Portland schools home, and I hope that I can bring as much passion as some of the folks that you honored tonight. So thank you, and thank you for the shift in the agenda. My family and my graduates that I'm heading to tomorrow, thank you as well.
No problem. Is there any percent?
I can do Barbara, and then you can just do one vote for both.
Yep, we'll do it together.
So next, I would like to introduce the incoming principal at Rowe, Miss Barbara Fletcher. Barbara is with us tonight as well. Barbara holds a master's in educational leadership from the University of Southern Maine and a bachelor's in elementary education from the University of Maine at Farmington. Her experience in administration consists of 3 years as principal in Old Orchard Beach and 2 years as assistant principal in Old Orchard Beach. Before that, she served for 14 years as a kindergarten teacher in Old Orchard Beach as well. But in spite of all those Old Orchard Beaches, she lives in Portland, just down the street from me. So we are incredibly grateful that you are coming home, and very happy to have you join us. So if you would like to say a word.
Sure. I would like to thank the board also for having me tonight. I'm thrilled for this opportunity to be able to provide instructional leadership here in Portland, part of my community. Some things that I really appreciate about the Portland schools that I witnessed through my own children's education and continue to witness as they're still students here is really the comprehensive approach that's taken to education. Strong character in alignment with rigorous academic standards are very, very near and dear to my heart. And again, I witnessed those in my own kids, and I'm really very much looking forward to being part of the team here and being able to be part of that process with, kids at Rowe and within the whole community. I have had a chance to spend some time at Rowe over the last couple of weeks. I've started building some really wonderful relationships with students, families, and staff. So again, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
Any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the personnel items listed, election of administrators, please indicate. It's unanimous. Welcome to Portland Public Schools. Have a safe drive home, by the way. Thank you. Next, for the board focus on educational items, first we're going to have the people goal update. As superintendent, are you going to set it up?
I am going to set it up, and I'm going to set it up from down there.
Okay. Are you present?
So today, as we look at the end of the school year, we wanted to do an update on our people goal. As you know, the people goal is our fourth goal, and in our graphic, it's at the base of our goals because it is meant to signify the fact that everything that we do, everything that we try to accomplish is built on the foundation of our people. And you saw today the incredible caliber of the people that work in the Portland Public Schools that have given their lives and careers to the Portland Public Schools, and also the wonderful people that are joining us as part of the school district. So what we wanted to do today is to sort of bring you full circle to all of the work that's happened over the past year around our people goal. And as you know, we have two ways of thinking about our progress in this area, and one is by looking at our employee engagement, and the other one is by working to diversify our staff in the school district. So what we're going to do today, the part that I'm going to take the lead in, and then we're going to have the rest of our team share portions of their work related to the other part. I'm going to focus on the staff engagement, and I'm going to walk us through some of the TNTP results, talk a little bit about the highlights and the opportunities for growth coming from our TNTP survey. You may recall that this is the second year that we administer the survey. Last year was the first year. We thought we had a great response rate then, and it only got better this year. So it's obvious that our staff believes that this is an important gauge of the climate in the school district, and they respond by taking the survey seriously. The survey covers a wide range of topics, and those fall align closely with our Portland Public Schools goals, our achievement, whole student equity, and people. So there are specific dimensions under the TNTP survey that are aligned to those four goals. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the teacher survey, which is called Insight. In case you don't remember, this survey is administered to over 2,000 schools across the country, from urban to rural, from large to small. So it is known to be representative of of those perspectives. It's a validated survey that has that level of rigor underneath it. What the survey does is it gives us the insights from our teachers. It's called Insight. That's the name of the actual teacher survey. And then it allows us to share the feedback with staff in the same way that we're sharing it with you today. Much of what you're seeing today is also the information that we shared with our building leaders about a month ago, and that each of them at the school level shared with their faculties at different points since the survey was administered. And the whole idea behind this is that we do this to understand what the gauge of our culture is, and to have information that will help us to prioritize what it is that we need to do to be able to improve on that culture. So the index, the Insight Index, is a combination of items from the survey that the TNTP organization has pulled together into this holistic measure of school culture. It basically looks at three aspects of school culture. The first is the degree to which there is a clear vision that is articulated. Then it looks at the extent to which that vision is understood and shared by the staff in the building. And then it gauges whether teachers feel that the institution, the school, the district, is organized to support them in achieving that shared vision. That's what the Insight Index is. We, as a district, have a pretty wide spread in our school index. You can see, on the right-hand side, those are our top quartile. Each of those bars represents a school in the Portland Public Schools, and so it ranges from a very high performance level that, is at or above the national top quartile to schools that are significantly below the national average and even the Portland average. The Portland average is right there, so we're going to look at that in a second, but that's where our Portland average is in the index. So the line, the lowest line there is our district average. The one above that is the national average, and then the top two lines are the Portland top quartile and the national top quartile, and you can see that those are pretty close to each other. Some of the takeaways from the survey that we're going to spend a little bit of time on are that, in general, our performance on that index improved slightly over this past year for the average, not for the top quartile. The top quartile sort of held at the same level. We'll talk a little bit about the fact that peer culture improved overall, although it's flat for the top quartile, and that you will note that there is a downward trend in our diversity, equity, and inclusion domain within the survey, as well as in the academic expectations dimension, and that in particular you'll see is more sharp for the top quartile. And then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the learning environment, where we have some interesting set of circumstances with some questions increasing sharply and other questions decreasing sharply. So it's an interesting, so it's basically flat at the district level, but it's flat coming from sharp increases and sharp decreases. So this gives you the perspective on that first bullet, which is the fact that you can see that our index increased slightly this past year from 6.3 to 6.5 for the district average. You can also see that our top quartile remained flat, so there was no increase, but there also wasn't a decrease in that index. Peer culture improved overall, though, as I said, it's flat for the top quartile, and you see the changes in the diversity and inclusion. So there's peer culture. You can see that it increased slightly for our average as a district, but it was slightly down for the top quartile. You can see that academic expectations, which is a critical dimension, decreased slightly and rather sharply for our top quartile schools. And you can see that the diversity, equity, and inclusion domain dropped significantly, both for our top quartile schools and for our district average. And you can see that same information if you follow it down to the next set. That is what it looks like against the national average. You can see that the national average generally stays pretty flat. It's many years of schools taking this, and so it is, it does not change radically, small shifts at the most. But you can see, in our case, that there are significant movements, both positive and negative in that area. And for this, we just looked at the district average against the national average, not the top quartile. Then finally, learning environment, which I talked about earlier, is bimodal. I think that that's really important because there is, TNTP has developed what they call the domain pyramid, and the foundational aspect of that is the learning environment. It's the base on which all of the other domains is built, and so that's one where our data is something that, you know, I think it's something for us to be concerned about and to pay special attention to. And I do think that we'll talk briefly about some of the things that we're doing about that. So you can see here, and it's not particularly visible here, but there are 3 questions where our average increased. So those are questions about, across my school, there are consistent expectations and consequences for student behavior. Teachers and leaders at my school immediately address misbehavior in shared school spaces like hallways and the lunchroom, and school leaders provide me with the support I need to maintain high standards for student behavior in my classroom. So in those 3 areas, we had improvements in the district average, although we did see drops in our in 2 of those questions for our top quartile schools. And then we have 3 questions which are interactions between students and adults at my school are respectful. School leaders promote a safe and productive learning environment in my school, and my school is a good place to teach and learn, where you see some sharp decreases. One of the things that we've emphasized and that we've focused on through the budget process is building the capacity of our schools to deal with disruptions. And that's at the core of what our Breathe program is all about. And that is an effort to attempt to impact this particular area as one where we know that it's foundational, and without it, there is, there's a high likelihood that we will not be able to see the improvements that we need in this particular domain. So that's one of the things that we're doing as a district to specifically address the learning environment concerns that come from this data. We're going to shift to talk a little bit about our leaders' perspectives. So this is the perspectives from the survey that our principals took. And so some of the findings from this are also important to highlight. First of all, that you'll see, and we'll go into this at some depth, that our leaders' perception of our academic structures, so things like our curriculum assessment and instructional expectations, are pretty low. Also, that they have concerns about our teacher evaluation and our observation and feedback mechanisms. There's a strong sense among our leaders that they don't have the ability to, and the ability means the flexibility, the autonomy, the support from the district to be able to impact their staff in meaningful ways. And you'll see in particular that middle school scores are very low in that particular area, and I'll talk about our theory about why that is. And you will also see that in general, our leaders are working really heavy schedule, and so when asked about the sustainability of that work, only 50% of them, so half of our leaders, say that they believe that this work is, that this pace of work is sustainable. And you will see, sort of in contrast to what we just highlighted with the teacher survey, that our leaders are firmly behind the fact that we're doing the right work at the district. And I'll talk a little bit about our theories about that particular contrast as well. So this is for academic structure. So these are questions like the district provides me with the training I need to accurately assess the alignment of lesson plans, assessments, and student tasks. The district provides high-quality curricula that's aligned to the state standards, and the district provides clear examples or models for rigorous instruction. As you can see, from 22 as the lowest to 32 as the highest. So, a third, at the maximum, a third of our school leaders believe that we are supporting them effectively on this. As you know, this is one of our priorities as a district. Again, in the budget, we emphasized the need to have academic structures as a district that support the work that's happening in our schools. So this is something that we are very much looking forward to impacting as we move forward with that increased level of support from the district. Teacher evaluation, about half of our leaders or less believe that our teacher evaluation is actually helping to do what it's intended to do. We have been working collectively with our teachers over the past year to address this concern. This is not something that is new to this year's survey, and so it is something that we have spent the better part of the year and are prepared to make significant changes to our evaluation system to be able to change the way in which our leaders and our teachers experience their evaluations. You can also see that they don't believe that we're supporting them effectively in using that evaluation system. So it's not only that the evaluation system isn't achieving its goals, but they're not getting the support that they need to be able to use that evaluation system effectively. So I mentioned that in general, our leaders don't feel that they have the district's support for sort of impacting retention at their school. And so that is something that we understand from the data and that we have theories about. And I think one of the things that helps to strengthen that theory is that if you recall last year, we had some significant programmatic cuts at the middle school level. And as a result of those programmatic cuts, just because of the nature of who was, what programs were being cut and staff needed to move, at the middle school level, we had significant changes that were directed by people's seniority and certification, which impacted school culture in ways that principals would have preferred it not impact them. And so this is, sort of if you think that when we do those things, it doesn't really have consequences at the school level, this is evidence that it really does affect the work of our schools and our school leaders. And so we wanted to highlight this particular piece of data because it is a significant, you can see that, in general, it's not a great story, but at the middle school, it's a dramatically worse picture. And then I mentioned the workload. Only about half of our principals believe that the workload that they currently have is sustainable. And when asked how much time they spend on their work, it's it's 57 hours a week is what they reported on average. So some obviously do more, some do less, but that's what they reported. And then the only saving grace is that when, and this is the only piece, and I will do more about central office at a future meeting, but just to sort of put it in context, this is my direct reports, and among my direct reports, I think I was the one who answered that the workload was sustainable, although Barb says that I did not take the survey, but I think, so somebody said that the workload is sustainable, and everybody else is somewhere in the range of no to yeah, maybe. So I think that is important for you to also see. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the next sections of our presentation today is going to highlight the tremendous work that's been happening in this area for the past year. And so where you saw that decrease in our teachers' perceptions of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you see what is a pretty significant improvement among our leaders. And so these are questions around whether the district leadership encourages us to examine racial differences in student data, such as academic outcomes, discipline, and attendance, whether we've provided guidance on when to take action when we have inequitable consequences for behavior. So differential behavior outcomes, things along those lines, district policies, recognition of the work that you've done to impact policies at the district level that make it clear that we are respectful and inclusive of students from different language backgrounds, disabilities, sexual orientation, culture, and so on. So I think that that's from our leaders' perspective. And you can see that that's not quite the same story when we look at our staff. And I think, and maybe this is our wishful thinking, but we tend to believe that this shows we had an sort of naive belief that our staff had a naive belief early on that we were incredibly welcoming and appreciative of our diversity. And the more that they've done the work that we're going to talk about later, the more they recognize that the institutions themselves are institutions that are not designed for equity. And so you see that recognition playing itself out in the data that you are seeing there. So that's it for my portion of the presentation, which was really to walk us through the TNTP data at both the teacher data and the school level data. And I'm going to turn it over to Barb to talk about the sort of the metric that wraps it all together. If you recall, in the Portland Promise, we had a indicator of engagement. At the time that we did that, we used 95% of our staff are going to be engaged. That's not quite the way that this is measured, and Barb is going to explain that.
So, we're going to talk about both of our people goal metrics. So there are two of them, as Javier has talked about, increasing employee engagement and increasing the diversity of our staff. One of my goals this year, and I'm hoping it's going to happen, is that we're going to really spend some time setting our baselines, which we haven't done successfully. We have a new data manager, and so I'm looking forward to sitting down so we can figure out, okay, really, where are we starting and then where are we trying to get to. So we're going to talk about the Net Promoter, which is what we're using for our engagement measure. I'll share some results year over year, and just reminding you that we're using this as our proxy for engagement for the staff in the district. So let's just take a second to take a look at what Net Promoter is. We talked about it last year. It can be confusing for people, so I just want to spend a minute talking about it. The Net Promoter was originally developed as a business tool for customer loyalty, and from there it grew into an employee Net Promoter score, so they also have developed it for businesses to use. It was really built off the basic Net Promoter system, and it allows employers to measure really get a snapshot of their employees' willingness to be ambassadors for the company, really advocating employment. And so research has shown that high Net Promoter Scores, it's not just about loyalty, that it's really about retention of employees, right? So people are going to stay, as well as increased productivity. So that's why we've decided to use it. So as part of TNTP, we added the Net Promoter question of how likely are you to recommend working at Portland Public Schools to a friend. To do the calculation for the score, you would take the promoters, which are the green smiley faces on the right-hand side, and you subtract your detractors. So in the middle are these passives, people who are on the 7-8 scale, and those are basically, they don't count towards anything. So the percentage is converted to an actual number. So if you had 100 people take it, and you had 50 people who were promoters, and 30 people who were passives, and 20 who were detractors, you're going to have 50 minus 20 for, it's basically 30% or 30. That's your score. It gets converted. So you can see on the bottom that the range is from negative 100 to positive 100, that a Net Promoter Score of greater than 0 is considered good, and anything over 50 is considered excellent. I would like us to think that as a district, ultimately, we are trying to get into the sort of 10 to 50 range. Aspirational at the moment, you'll see, but eventually we hope to get there. All right, so this is our year over year. You can see that there hasn't been significant change. This is district overall. We were 0 last year. You can see that on the right-hand side, and we were -5 this year. If you took a calculator and added up the sections, what you'll see is the detractors have essentially stayed the same. They're at 33%. Some promoters moved to passive. So promoters went from 32% to 29%, so there's a 3% shift there, and passives increased by that 3%. So that gives you a high-level picture, but to really get an idea of what's going on, you need to take a deeper dive into some of the subgroups. So this is a very busy, graphic. And I am happy to share a blow-up version because it's hard to see in this case. But what you'll see, what I did is I lined up, so the top row is district office. And district office went from a -14 last year to a +15 this year. School leaders went from 34 last year to 8 this year. Support staff essentially stayed the same, -2 to -1. Teachers went from -3 to -10. And central operations went from a +19 to a -14. Okay, so this is the year over year, left to right. So broad range of results. A couple of comments. So we had really positive movement in district office, leveraged by the strength of the work that Assistant Superintendent Nolly has led this year. That academics office, their Net Promoter Score went from 0 last year to 50 this year. Additionally, despite our unsustainable workload in the superintendent's office, that also rose from 0 to 36 this year. So that's really the leverage that we saw in district office. Some of the declines that we're seeing really can be partially explained by some of the things that you heard from the TNTP data. For instance, the school leaders talking about their workload went from 62% strongly agree to that 48% this year, right? So we also saw some of the things that were talked about on the teacher survey, why we believe that we saw some decline this year in those figures. So overall, the metric along with the Insight Index will really help us identify where we need to focus our efforts going forward. That's the whole purpose of this. You really have to strive to get to the bottom of the whys, and that's really the work that we should be doing. It's what we say, it's a journey, it's not a destination, right? So this is how we try to figure out where to focus our efforts and our work going forward. All right, so let's shift to the other metric, which is increasing staff diversity in the district. One of the things that before we get too deep into this, because we've been doing a lot of work on this, is to just talk about the need and the importance to highlight that the equity-based work that we're doing, particularly around the PD, is really important because of the connection between people and equity and how that work needs to be done together. The Equity PD lays the foundation to make the changes that in how we approach DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work in the district. It underpins a lot of this work. As you know, Barrett Wilkinson has been leading the DEI-focused work this year with our staff, and they're going to provide an update right now on the Equity Leaders Cohort, which is work that's been going on during the course of this year. And then we'll come back around to get into the specifics around the staff diversity efforts.
Hi everyone, how are you? I'm Barrett Wilkinson. I don't think I've met the student reps before, but I think I know the rest of you. This is, work that's connected to many, many layers, but in short, the Equity Leaders Cohort, which was launched this year, it does many things, but part of it, as it relates to this conversation, is really about creating a workplace that people want to be at long term. It's creating the conditions that all people feel supported and encouraged. So we launched this year the Equity Leaders Cohort, which is basically staff from each building in the district who have been recommended by or identified in collaboration with their administrator, who come together and participate in training of trainer model sessions and learn equity literacy topics that then they turn around and deliver professional development in their school buildings. So we started the year with about 25. We're wrapping up with a little over 30. Some schools have sent one, some of our smaller elementary schools in particular, whereas I think Deering High School this year had a high of 6 equity leaders this year. They are released from school, so they get subs. They come together for a half-day session, really learn different modules that they can use to lead conversations in their buildings about different equity literacy topics. So when we started, there was, a fair amount of apprehension, what is this? How are we going to do this? But the reality is this was the only way, without paying an outside consultant tons and tons of money to come in, this was the only way that we were going to be able to really expand equity, literacy, diversity, equity, inclusion mindsets among staff is by building capacity. And so that's what we've done. And so, part of their role is to lead professional development at school, but also we've built a community of practice among those staff and educators. So it's a lot of classroom teachers. We have some social work. We have a couple of administrators that participated as well that are part of this. So we have a really, really awesome group. So these are just some of the topics that we actually built the training of trainers around. And so most schools would then turn around and they wouldn't necessarily lead sessions exactly about each topic. It's sort of, that was school to school, but this is really where we got to. So we started with dismantling privilege and challenging bias, talking about understanding racism, history of race and microaggressions, what culturally responsive education means, cultural humility, and then starting to get into economic disparity. So schools had 3 or 4 sessions over the course of the school year. So this was on their Wednesday early release PD. So 90-minute or 2-hour sessions about each of these topics, led by the equity leaders. We were supported by the Center for Education Equity. I think some of you were on the board when we had them sort of introduce themselves. They're our federally identified equity assistance center, and so their resources have been available to us at no charge. Because it's federally funded. It's part of their the Department of Education funding. So they've been a great resource to us in kind of being an outside consultant. They've helped connect me to other districts that are leading similar efforts. So I have, kind of people to say well, how did you structure this and what did you do and things like that. So So, and I manage evaluation for all of the schools all year so that I have like the district view and then also give schools individual feedback. So if a team, if the team at Deering High School leads a session, I have evaluation from everyone who was in the session. I write an evaluation report for them, but then I also kind of can have a cross-district look at each topic. So when we did the topic of bias and privilege, for example, I had evaluations for all the schools. I could kind of see how did everyone take that in. So this you're looking at is actually a composite of all the evaluations where you can kind of get a sense of where people are at. So we have in blue, the content of the PD was understandable to me. In red, the content of this PD engaged and supported my learning, and in green, I can apply what I learned today to my work with students and in the classroom. So those were 3 separate questions, and people were asked on a scale to rate where they landed. And so this was really interesting to kind of see it all put together, that by and large, most people are saying, yeah, I strongly agree or agree to all of those. So this was really, really positive. Because equity work is not easy. When we start to talk about issues of bias and we start to challenge assumptions, that brings up feelings for us as individuals about our system and that, we all have a response to. And so sometimes I think equity leaders really struggled with that, like fielding some of that negativity and getting pushback and sometimes those voices are louder than those of people who are really excited about this and are really like, no, this is exactly where we need to be going and this is exactly the conversation we need to be having. And so I think this was really helpful to everyone to just see how it's playing out. I don't know oh, these are all separate, sorry. So we had a couple questions too that just asked people for more open-ended responses, and so you can kind of read through those. But as I told the equity leaders, I shared this data with them at our last meeting of the year when we got together. I gave myself a time limit. I just said, I'm going to spend 5 minutes. I'm going to grab a couple comments because it wasn't about if I could find these comments. It was about how much time I wanted to spend finding comments that really kind of capture what we did and what they did and this really great work. And so really positive responses both to the facilitation that their colleagues led as well as to that our district is wanting to talk about this and helping people start to figure it out. So that's that.
Thanks, Barrett. All right, so now we're going to go back and talk a little bit about the diversity hiring efforts and sort of the changes in structures and practices that we're doing in the district to increase our staff diversity. Overall, I just want people to understand that in my mind, this is sort of a two-pronged effort. We have the work to get people into our pipeline, so this sort of recruiting piece, and then it's about getting people through the internal process to get hired. And there's two separate streams of work that happen. Also, let's not forget why we're doing this work. So the research indicates that a more diverse educator workforce is great for all, not just students of color, that staff benefit from a more diverse workforce, that outcomes are generally better for more diverse organizations, and of course, just the voices of our students, wanting more staff that look like them and share their experiences, right? So those are all really important things for us to be thinking about. So when we talk about getting people into our pools and building a pipeline, what are the things that we're doing? So the first is around sort of local, regional recruitment and things that we're working on. That includes strategic partnerships with local organizations like the Diversity Hiring Coalition, FedCap, Portland Adult Ed, the City of Portland's new Office of Economic Opportunity, USM has an urban cohort. We are looking at developing some targeted partnerships with colleges and universities that are outside of Maine but are in the Northeast, who have strong teacher prep programs and might have student populations that are more diverse than we might find in Maine. We are doing an internal review of our website and our recruiting materials. There are definitely some updates that need to be made in terms of when we think about the barriers and how challenging it is for people to apply for jobs. And we're also thinking about how to activate our internal referral process. So that's the graphic on the right is really, how are we leveraging the folks that are already here to bring more people that they know into the system. Other pipeline building activities. Those are Teach Portland activities, so our summer program, and the Ed Academy at Portland Adult Ed. So Teach Portland is about to kick off its 3rd year, just a couple of weeks out from that launch. Again, heavily oversubscribed this year. I had about 80 applicants for 35 positions. We are planning to have 15 adults, 10 college students, and 10 high school students in the program. We'll have a wait list. Almost all of them will be in our schools 4 mornings a week for a 5-week period. They will earn a $1,000 stipend for that time. And we're currently trying to figure out what we're going to do for our summer learning opportunity. In general, we've offered something on Friday mornings, and so that's in progress. The other sort of Teach Portland program is Ed Academy at Portland Adult Ed. That launched this spring. Anita St. Ange is here, and she's going to give you a little bit of an overview of where they are with that program.
Good evening. I have talked about the Education Academy and how proud we are of that a number of times when I've come here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. You will be getting a handout with a lot of the detail, and again, I'm not going to cover a lot of that. But we are just so excited, continue to be excited about the ongoing work that's going on. You can see here we have 11 students who participated. 9, have the equivalent of 120 credits. Everybody is in the pipeline at some level. You can see there are 10 participants actively applying, and the reason for that is one person is not yet work authorized. So the minute that person becomes work authorized, that person will be in the pipeline as well. But before I turn the program over to Bridget Kahn, who is one of the teachers who's very involved in the program, I did want I gave you our invitation to our graduation, which is June 27th, and I want to make sure that I personally invite all of you. We would love to have you. So I'm going to turn it over to Bridget Kahn.
Hello, thank you. So I'm a teacher at Adult Ed, and I've been involved with organizing Education Academy and also supporting the students as they've graduated. It sounds like you know a little bit about it, but I just wanted to kind of highlight how much this is a coordinated effort between Adult Ed and a lot of schools in the district as well as central office. We were able to have our space at Portland High. The teachers were retired K through 12 teachers, so they were able to bring their kind of recent experience into the classroom teaching our foreign trained professionals. We had mock interviews from HR staff, and we had 45-hour practicums throughout the district. So it's been it was a huge undertaking. The students were in class 5 days a week for about 15 hours a week for 12 weeks. So they committed a lot. The district has committed a lot, and we're really proud of the efforts. The students now, so we've had 11 graduates, and through that time, since graduation in April, as Anita said, everybody's been applying for jobs. We've had multiple interviews at Portland schools on a number of positions. The Breathe program has been something that students have been very interested in. During the class, we had Christy Morin come in and present about the Breathe program, so people were prepped for it and interested in it. And so we've had a number of applicants and interviews for the Breathe and for EdTech positions, interviews for the Lyseth Spanish Immersion program, and possibly for Teach Portland. So we're really moving forward with that. And part of the program is not just that people will get a job as an ed tech, but that we will continue to work with them as they move forward towards their ultimate goal of being a teacher. So students have been linked with services in the community, WIOA and Competitive Skills Scholarship Program, and those two programs will help support the students in their efforts. So if they need to take a methods course, if they need to take an additional content course, those will be paid for through those resources. So the hope is that not just they'll get in the doors, but they'll continue their career at Portland schools. For the fall, we are planning to run it again. We've been building in feedback from the practicum teachers, from the classroom teachers, and from the students to try to make it more sustainable and continue it forward. Some of the things that we are thinking of changing, or at least trying for the fall, is having the classes, instead of an intensive cohort, which although was really beneficial in a lot of ways, it also limits who and how many people can be part of the program. So we are kind of extending it, doing 2 courses in the fall, 2 in the winter, and possibly a practicum in the spring. And we are piloting doing this at night. So possibly people who are already working in the school district will be able to come at night and take these classes as they go forward. So another thing that many of the students are having trouble with is, even as they are getting their feedback from the state and getting initial conditional certifications, one thing that many people are missing is praxis. And even if you have the content knowledge, even if you have the math knowledge, sometimes the English piece is difficult. So one thing we are considering developing is praxis prep courses at Adult Ed that hopefully the current Education Academy graduates will be able to take, the future, and possibly people that are in the district now that are struggling with that. So we are feeling very positive about it. We're excited for the next step and expanding it, and we will keep you updated on the results. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to shift from recruitment to work that is happening internally in terms of changing the hiring practices and what we're doing once folks get into the system. So we've done a number of things this spring, really this year, but they've rolled out this spring. We have offered training for hiring managers and teams around equity hiring and the focus on equity hiring. That was rolled out in conjunction with the new equity hiring toolkit, which you will all get a copy of momentarily. We created a district DEI hiring pool. These are folks who support building hiring committees. And we also worked to identify and prioritize diverse candidates. Barrett has and continues to be an incredible partner in this work for me. So in April, we rolled out a 90-minute hiring manager training where we shared the toolkit. All K-12 administrators and hiring managers attended that. It was a train-the-trainer model. We focused on unconscious bias in the hiring process and best practices for reducing bias in the hiring process. You have a copy of the toolkit. I'm going to share just a sample of some of the things that we used during the training, much of which is in the toolkit. We also created these PowerPoints that folks are using as they're rolling out this training. So bias exists and it impacts hiring. I think that that's not a surprise to people. Of course, the research shows that diverse workplaces enhance talent, perspectives, and outcomes, that diverse teams have innovative ideas, that managers learn and grow by supporting more diverse teams. And so, but the reality is, bias is inherent to us as humans, right? The amount of information that we're processing, we're forced to do this sort of sorting process, and as a result, implicit or unconscious bias occurs. One of the things that we've shared, which is this picture, is a somewhat famous example in orchestras. And some people might already be familiar with this. In the 1950s, the top 5 U.S. orchestras had fewer than 5% female musicians. In 1952, Boston Symphony started blind auditions. So they basically had people behind a screen auditioning, and they were really just listening to the quality of the performer and not looking at who they were. Other orchestras also adopted this practice, but some not until the 1990s. Using the blind audition process, women were 50% more likely to make it into the final round, and their chances of landing the job tripled. So an interesting and not surprising instance of bias in the hiring process. So we feel that this work is super important to creating a more fair process in our hiring processes. Another conversation that we have is getting people to really think deeply and reflect about assumptions that they make when they're looking at candidates, and asking them to intentionally think about that, step outside their comfort zone. So this slide is just makes a point about fit, and when we talk about whether someone is a good fit or not a good fit, it can be a code for people like us. There we go. So one of the things that we introduce is were the different types of bias that can come up that are inherent in the hiring process. Again, highlighting biases, creating awareness for hiring managers and hiring teams to be thinking about these things as they are reviewing resumes, interviewing applicants. I'm sure that you're familiar with this. I know that I experienced this as well. When you have a candidate and you're looking at a resume and you think, oh, this person went to the same college as I did, or lives in my neighborhood, right? So, and you inadvertently might be sorting without intentionally doing that, and it is not based on job qualifications. So creating awareness of this is key. So again, the goal is to improve our practices to reduce bias. We've talked about recruitment already. We're doing work on our hiring practices to support what we believe is a more fair process and to give really complete consideration in the screening and the hiring process. We have shared expectations with hiring teams about the interview process, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I'll point out that the 2 big takeaways from the Equity Hiring Toolkit is around the use of hiring committees and that the interview process uses multiple measures. So those are really the 2 key things that we are looking at this year. So again, the use of hiring teams to minimize bias. These are the expectations that we rolled out this year, that all schools will use hiring committees, that all committees will be versed in the equity hiring practices, that all committees will have at least 1 representative from the DEI community, and that all hiring processes will include at least 2 interview questions from the Equity Hiring Toolkit. So there are specific questions in there that we're offering up to people to choose from. Just wanted to point out for bullet number 2, a separate PowerPoint was created, so we did the training with the administrators, then we created a PowerPoint for them to use and roll out with their hiring teams. For bullet number 3, we set the expectation that the composition of hiring teams is going to include a broad range of stakeholders at the table, including at least 1 person with a diversity lens, and that person would preferably be a person of color. We also created this district-wide pool of staff who are available to sit on hiring teams as the DEI rep. So that exists now. People can call us and say, we need somebody to come out and sit on our hiring team. And the other piece is this idea around multiple measures, right? So traditionally, you have people come in, you sit around the table, you ask questions, and then you might make a hiring decision. What we are requiring is performance tasks. Again, it minimizes the bias because you're looking at the actual tasks that the person would do for that job. So you're using some additional measures when you're weighing your candidates. So again, this is just a sampling of the training that we've done, of the tools that we've rolled out. Staff have been incredibly receptive and really excited about the work this year. I'm feeling very optimistic about the outcomes. I'm hoping when we get to the fall and the end of the hiring season that we'll feel some of the results of the work that we've been doing. People have questions for me or for anyone who has presented this evening?
I just want to say thank you. This is a lot of work that you and Barrett and the staff have done. And you've come a long way, as exemplified with all the work at Adult Ed. So I really appreciate all the hard work. And I think, honestly, in a short order of time, I mean, but I appreciate it. I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you.
Ms. Bondo.
On the hiring committees, how many members should be part of that committees?
How many people should sit on a committee?
Yes.
We don't actually have a recommended number, but in general, I would say that there are 4 to 6 people on most hiring committees in schools. That's been my experience.
Okay, when you say about 4 or 6, and you just heard, I heard that you mentioned at least one person of color, as the balance can be on the 6 people and having only one person of color can really make any equity on that representation.
So one of the conversations we're having is the role of the hiring manager as the facilitator to ensure that that person has voice in that situation. And I agree, this has come up, and particularly if you have, that person might be an ed tech or someone else who's in terms of a power role. So we've definitely been addressing that, and I acknowledge that it could be an issue.
But I just want to say thank you, because this is a start. We never had that, and this is a beginning of something change, and I can really appreciate it, and I really say thank you. This is something amazing, and thank you for doing it.
Ms. Figdor.
Sorry, given the wide range of response or of scores, looking at the index, are there any trends based on the level of the school? So looking at our elementary schools versus middle schools versus high schools, other than so on the index in particular?
No, I mean, there aren't. We have high schools represented both in the top quartile and in the bottom quartile. We have elementary schools represented in both of those. I think our middle schools tend to be in the middle range, if I recall correctly. I don't know that, and that's the other thing, that the composition of these tiers has changed from year to year. So, I think that there's a degree of instability to this, and the fact that we're just starting this process. But I do think that it is interesting to see that very, very broad range of culture, and I think that that's not a good thing.
Ms. Davis.
Do we see any clustering at one end or the other, or any alignment between schools that have a strong model, say our ELL schools, or where there's a clear teaching model or philosophy, as opposed to just sort of we're an elementary school in general?
I don't recall the specifics, but
nothing jumped out.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's universal, but I do see some trend there.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Bondo.
Yeah, it's going to be for the PPS diversity. That's a question that I have. how often are you doing those training, and if you can, if it's going to be just for the people working on the school, or are you going to include some of the community members? Because when you look about equity here and about the cohort here is now really well representing, talking about the equity, and if you see the theme and the different aspects of the area, I think the diversity of on the issues can be a little more broad. I mean, if you're going to include some other community members who are more having that cultural competency, be including to those voices, or you just limit it to the school members?
So in terms of number, most schools did 3 or 4. We get together, so there were 4 training of trainers sessions, so for the equity cohort, and then we met monthly after school. Okay. And so that was really more around like facilitation support as opposed to them learning new modules. It was like, who's changed this thing and done something cool, or who's struggling with what, and so we met really all throughout the school year. In terms of community, so we've started to train broader than just school staff as well. So like I did train at Portland Adult Ed. We did central office staff. We're starting to include more and more elements of our staff. I'm working right now with Connect Ed and Learning Works to figure out how to reach some of the partners that are really, folks that are also working with our students right after school, during learning support, all that kind of stuff. And so we're trying to figure out a way to get them some of this education opportunities as well. So that's sort of where we're at in year 1, but yeah.
Thank you.
Was the 35 spots you said? I'm sorry, for the is it the Education Academy? You had 80 applicants and we have 35 spots. Is there a thought of, because we've had, is there a thought about expanding it, or just kind of narrowing down the way that those 35 spots are instructed?
It's financially driven.
Nice.
So that's the amount of money that we have. We would love to support more. The schools would love to have more, but that's where we are this year.
Yeah, it was great to get 80 applicants. It speaks about it. Any other questions?
I just want to thank you for your support of this work, and I also want to thank these amazing people. They have worked tirelessly. As you can see from the data, we have a long way to go, but I do believe that we are pushing the right buttons, pulling the right levers to impact the data, of school climate, and to actually increase the diversity of our workforce. So, and it wouldn't be possible without these folks and the work that they've done. So, thank you guys.
Ms. Davis.
And I'd just throw in, as part of our constituent coffee this morning, a number of board members were there, and we were actually talking about the impact of how students and staff feel and their sense of inclusion and safety within our schools is probably one of the strongest things that will determine their achievement. And while we have focused on achievement, the discussion amongst the board was very much about how we need to look at other parts of essentially the Portland Promise to drive achievement. Achievement is not singly content. But it's creating a school culture, an environment for staff and for students that really supports each student and each staff person to achieve their greatest potential. So this is very exciting after the discussion this morning to see this work as well. So thank you.
And I think just to piggyback on that, the index in particular, this index is really what collective efficacy is all about. And so when we talk about collective efficacy, it's really, this is the place where you will see it reflected.
Ms. Bondo.
Yeah, and I think if we invest on the core instruction in our, like we have for this year investment in our core instruction, and the years to come, we can have a better to analyze and to have more data here, especially for the leaders survey highlights, because they're gonna give a little more on that. So I think the assessment for the year for what we investing this year to our budget for the core instruction to coach and have the teacher, have the coach and the coaches to make sure then they know exactly how to lead on some of those issues in the classroom. And I think it's just relating on what we heard from the constituents today. Yes.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Where are we at? There's no old business tonight. New business, no comments on first reads. We have a first read to approve the revisions to policy IKF, the graduation policy, and a first read to approve a 2-year MOU with the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. We did our personnel items earlier. And now, given that it's before the hour of 10 p.m., is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Morioni, seconded by Ms. Davis. All those in favor, please indicate. It's unanimous. Have a good night. Thank you.